if you could take a moment and go to thegrowingbanddirector.com to give at least $5 or $3 a month, and it helps the content continue to be created for you to help our profession grow. Let's go back to our scheduled episode. Welcome back to the Growing Band Director podcast. This is episode number 246. I'm here with Brian Joyce and Mark Waymire from South Jones High School in Mississippi. Gentlemen, how are you?
Wonderful. How are you?
Beautiful. Thanks
Good.
both. Thanks both for being here. Appreciate it so much. Mark, let's start with you. Can you tell us a little bit about sort of what you do and all that?
Sure. I was a public school band director for 15 years and then college professor for 12, I believe. And then made a decision about 7 years ago to start designing full time. So that's what I do. 22 years in the drum corps activity. I judge for indoor.
Mhm.
Sorry about that. Yeah, we're in the school building, obviously. Judge indoor percussion, have judged for WGI, BOA, those kinds of things. So very much still at this time of my life involved in music making.
That's great. Brian, what about you?
I like to say I'm a native of Huntsville, Alabama, but I've lived in Mississippi longer than I lived anywhere in my life. And so I went for Huntsville High School and got a couple of my degrees from Southern Miss down in Hattiesburg, just a little bit south of where we are right now. I've been teaching for this is my 14th year, and I've been here at South Jones since 2013. I assumed the program after Mr. Adams, Artie Adams, retired in 2017, and we've been just hanging on ever since.
Can you guys tell us a little bit about the program that you work in?
So we work, our program is grades 6 through 12. We serve a couple elementary schools. That's where the sixth grades are. And then the 7th through 12th is all on one campus, similar to an attendance center. And the total population here on our campus is right at about 1,200 students. And the band program here at South Jones has about 400 students in it.
It's a large program. So you have a marching band program, concert band program.
Yeah, we have all the elements of the programs. We've got marching band. We've got two high school concert ensembles. We have several indoor groups. We've got indoor percussion, a couple of winter guards. In the past, we have had indoor winds. We do jazz band, and obviously we have our junior high bands and the beginner bands as well. So just about every element of it that we can have, we've got it going on.
Excelsior Music Publishing is proud to sponsor the Growing Band Director podcast. With spring concert season on the horizon, Excelsior Music Publishing is proud to offer a vast catalog of inspiring concert band and jazz ensemble pieces that will be right at home on your spring programs. You'll find works by imaginative composers for all levels. Find music for your graduation and spring concerts at excelsiormusic.com. That's EXCELCIA music.com. That's beautiful. And Brian, we were talking a little bit. You said that Mark is a mentor of yours and you get to work together, similar to a friend of mine, Jeff Smith. Can you tell us a little bit about, that relationship of having Mark being able to design for your program and seeing him as a mentor?
It's been wonderful. I tell a lot of people when they ask kind of how this whole thing started was Mark came to a rehearsal one day and he said, "Well, how do you feel like it went?" And I was like, I thought it was great. Thought it went really well. And he was like, "Well, let's
Uh-oh.
go sit down and have a conversation." So Mark and I had a conversation, and he was very honest with me. And I've gotten a lot better about taking that information and being able to deal with it and do something with it. And so from that point, when Mark kind of entered my instructional life, I guess you could say, our friendship and honesty and whatnot kind of took off, and it's been a really great relationship. And he's very quick to tell me what is good and very quick to tell me what needs to be worked on a little
Yep.
bit. It's for me, it's personally and professionally what I absolutely need so that I can continue to grow as an educator. So his honesty and the camaraderie we have to help the program has been pretty great for me. And I owe a lot of my successes and whatnot to his mentorship and to several other folks who've done that for me as well, including Mr. Adams. But I see Mark on a pretty regular basis, and we talk a whole lot. And he's able to give me a lot of information and has really given me a good insight into how the marching world crafts what it crafts, and is a top-notch educator with a really great ear, and he has all the tricks in the toolbox. So it's just great to have him around.
Well, and the strength that you show in bringing somebody in who has that experience as the band director is awesome. So, Mark, as we go back in the first day that you watched Brian's band, as you sort of gave him that feedback, what are some of the things that you think the program does better now than it did before? Is that a fair question to ask?
Sure.
Everything.
Sure. It's going to assume that everything that I mentioned right now was at one point bad. I was talking earlier with Scarlett Sandifer, who is also a band director here. And I've known her since before she went to undergrad and through her undergrad, and now she's back here teaching. And all those things that we learn. I mean, I feel like I'm offering things to Brian based on my own experiences. I've been very, very lucky. I was asked to teach the drum corps that I marched in just a year after I aged out, and was with some great educators. And then I taught in Texas for the majority of my life, and a lot of great educators there and mentors there, and just passing those things along. Mississippi has a lot of really strong band programs. I grew up in Louisiana, a lot of strong band programs. Um, but the depth of knowledge I got outside of my state, added a lot to those tools in the toolbox, as Brian referred to them. So, and he and I talk a lot philosophically. I think a lot of things I brought were things that Brian just was not exposed to, which is, how do we know how to do something that we've never seen it done? And even if someone explains it to you, it's something different if you see it work or you have someone explain to you how to make it work. So I don't know if I can say anything specific other than being really self-reflective about what's happening, how best to use your time, how to take something that you want to say that's going to take 30 minutes and say it in 3 seconds. So just a lot of those kinds of things.
My good friend Trent Austin started Austin Custom Brass so many years ago. You can call him at 816-410-0826. They ship all over the world. They have a shop in Kansas City, Missouri, and they really are an amazing sponsor of this podcast. They do trumpets, trombones, euphoniums, tubas, mouthpieces, and more, all the way from the beginner to the professional. Austin Custom Brass has worked with thousands of brass players from around the world. And you can check them out on www.austincustombrass.biz. Whether you're a student, a band director, a parent, or a player, Austin Custom Brass is your place to go for all your brass playing needs. Austin Custom Brass works with band programs from all over the country. They can provide a bid to you today. They can work within your school's budget, and they accept POs. Call their team today at 816-410-0826. Austin Custom Brass is an amazing resource for brass players and great humans, great people. You'll love working with them. Give them a call. I can speak from my experience too. I remember running our marching band alone. Well, not alone, but it felt like alone after I'd finished jazz band, after I'd finished 8 hours of school, after I had, and like these kids were seeing me again. And sort of the overwhelmingness of like trying to do everything. And then the minute I had somebody else come in and kind of take the lead and support me in that case, it felt freeing. It was like, wow, this is so. Brian, I don't know if that's the same dynamic, if you kind of felt the same thing, but hearing that other voice and someone else to kind of take the lead for a little bit is just awesome.
Absolutely. I tried to go home one day when he showed up and he wouldn't let me leave, but I had to stay too.
I think that's one of the things that makes this unique as well. I don't interact with the students here as much as I have in the past, just because of how things have changed. When I was a university professor, I had more time to spend, and now that I'm designing full time, and I'm kind of split between a lot of programs. But even now, the fact that I can come here and the students know who I am, and that Brian was very open, certainly in the first 5 or 6 years that I was involved, and just letting me run rehearsal or part of rehearsal or being on the field with the members and talking to them. And it goes back to something we said earlier before we started the interview. A lot of it just came down to culture. The students aren't being quiet because you don't expect them to be quiet. No, I do expect them to be quiet. Okay, but they're not quiet. So let's figure out why. And again, I think Brian would agree with me. The more you structure rehearsal, the more you put responsibilities on them to help rehearsal go. It just makes things better. So being able to be hands-on here, I think has been part of how our relationship has been built, that I can come over here and I feel very comfortable. If Brian walked out of rehearsal, and he has done this before, and said, "Hey, can you do the next 15 minutes?" Sure, I got it. And part of that's also the community here being just supportive of the band program and what have you.
So if we're talking about building culture in a program, what are some, I mean, I've done multiple episodes with people, Joel Denton and other people on all on culture. So I'm looking for what are some ways that if you go into a place and you want to build the culture of your program, or maybe keys to the South Jones culture, what are some culture items that we can bring to people?
I would say for us, one of the things that I have found the most valuable, it's all built on trust. And I feel like the kids have to trust me. They have to trust the rest of the staff to know that we're going to do the right thing by them so that they can be successful. And I'm big on matched expectations. I'm not going to have expectations of the students that I don't have of myself or the other members of the staff. And the kids know that we will walk it as much as we talk it. And I think that builds some respect amongst the kids and how they interact with the staff. And then it also builds how they interact with one another, because that's the model that they're asked to use. And then that culture from there, I think, that the core group of the staff, and then the band leadership, and then it goes out to the remainder of the students. I think that's kind of the nucleus of how this whole thing really starts to go from there. And then it just spreads by exposure, and in time it just reaches farther and farther out, so more people can kind of see what's going on. And then the culture of expecting excellence becomes kind of the norm, and that's all that anybody knows. And I did a clinic not too long ago, and I had a really hard time with some of the student discipline in the ensemble, which was strange for me, because it's not something that we deal with here.
Mhm.
And we don't deal with that here, not because I have to be a certain way about it, but the kids hold themselves to a certain standard within the rehearsals now, that it really helps with all of that. And it didn't used to be super consistent from a student managerial standpoint, but it has gotten much better now, where they just kind of look at each other. No one has to be rude or get on to one another. It's just the kids know, like, all right, we got to be quiet so that we can get some information, and so we get another rep at whatever it is we're doing, whether it's the concert ensembles, or whether it's a marching band.
Mark, if you were to walk into a program, say you walk into my program, so what are some litmus tests of you can kind of tell what the culture of a program is like, whether it's positive or not?
Oh goodness, yeah. Just walking in the door is part of it. It's really interesting. After 9 years, Brian, I
Yeah.
think we've been together doing these things. I feel very much the same every time I walk into the program here. Usually, it's listening to students talk and how they interact. And here, today, I walked in and Brian was rehearsing, and I didn't recognize any of the students that were in here, but they all smiled at me, and I said hi, and they said hi. And in some programs, I would smile at students and say hi, and they wouldn't say anything, or they would, you know, try to not make eye contact. And then other places where I walk in, and if the director is busy talking to somebody, I'm standing in the room, those students are going to come up to me and say, "Hi, oh, you must be Dr. Waymire. We were told you were going to come." Just this openness. We often stereotype teenagers negatively as fitting this national bad stereotype. And it comes back to changing the culture. So litmus tests, just sensing that physically they're okay with me being in this space, and that maybe some of them are curious as to why I'm in this space or who I am, or that it has been set up that when a stranger is in the building, I'm gonna let you know who's coming, and you should not be apprehensive of that person. You should be welcoming. It's your job to welcome that person. It's not that person's job to make you feel like it's not my job to motivate them to just reach out and be good people, even though I'm much older than they are. Eye contact is part of it. Body language is part of it. Brian and I talk about that a lot. We're often taught as in undergrad to be a great band director, you've got to use your ears, use your ears, use your ears. And I believe that using your eyes is a bigger tell of everything.
Hmm.
I can give a downbeat and I know what I'm going to get based on what I see. Embouchures, hand positions, breath, posture, all of that stuff. I guess that would be another one if we went into rehearsal mode and I sensed that there was not a predictable, timed out process and procedure, whether it's concert band, jazz band, or marching band, that's probably an indicator that we're not utilizing our time well. The students are not completely in charge of. I'm gonna use the word discipline. I don't want to overuse that word, and I sense that Brian didn't want to overuse that word either, because we're not talking about yelling at people or making people run laps or whatever, but just realizing that I'm working with people that are used to being incredibly timely. If I were to say that it's rare that I come here, whether it's concert band or marching band or whatever, and feel like there's been 3 minutes wasted in a 2 hour rehearsal, that's pretty accurate. And I know what wasted time looks like and sounds like, and so do the students here now. So I would say just how quickly they respond to structure that you're trying to give them, that maybe they show me that structure before I ask for it, and that they're comfortable with you in the space and they're eager to have someone new in the space.
I love that. Okay, so let's get into the planning a little bit. This is kind of down later on our agenda, but you kind of mentioned it already. So what does a typical, let's say, marching band rehearsal look like, Brian? What is that sort of like? Say, how long is a rehearsal, and then just give us like a brief, how many minutes on this, how many minutes on that, how structured is it?
Sure. So we really only see everybody all at once on Tuesdays and Thursdays for about 2.5 hours each day, and then obviously we'll snag some Saturdays and whatnot if we can along the way. But for us, I'm a big believer in technique development, and then the application of the technique development, and spending a lot of time on that at the front end of the year, and then the application of it as time goes, I think is really important. But for me, the flow of a rehearsal, we've got everybody kind of and especially in the marching band realm, like everybody's got a spot they need to be in. They have a time that they need to be there. We do roll real quick. We go through it. We talk about the objectives of the day, based on what we've seen previously or heard previously, how we're going to meet those objectives. Everybody involved kind of has a plan and knows what their role is in it as from a staff perspective. And then we try to also, as frequently as possible, get the student leadership up to par with the plan for the day so that they can assist in making sure that things get carried out. And that they're really only there. The student leadership folks are only really there from a influential standpoint and not a corrective standpoint. That way that they can just kind of be a positive element as far as the rehearsal is concerned. So then if we can and have time and space available, I like to be separated. If we're doing new material, or if we need to really break something down, being able to be separated is the best version of that, because I don't want to waste anybody's time. And the color guard or the drum line standing around is typically never a great idea, especially the drummers. We all know how this goes, and so leaving them to their own devices sometimes is not a good thing. But they also all have gotten accustomed to over time, if that is the situation, everybody has something to be doing during downtime, whether that's going over some of the visual elements of the show or pulling up their music on their Beam app and simply going through it, just fingering through it or airplaying, whatever it may be. Those things like that will make sure that the time is used wisely. We will try to, if we can't fix something in 5 minutes or less, we will move on and come back to it after we figure out we got to come back to the drawing board to figure out why it's not working and how we can better utilize that time. And so we try to have a very targeted rehearsal, to where we're really focused on certain elements, especially as the show is, reaching its completion, from a creation standpoint. And then we'll work through that. And then at the very end of the rehearsal, we'll try to run just about everything that we know. Sometimes we like to start rehearsals with a run just to kind of get it out and going. It's just kind of where we are in the season kind of dictates the plan of rehearsal. We're a lot slower in the very beginning of the season, which is different than what we used to be. That's one of the things that Mark definitely encouraged us to do, was to just go very slow at the beginning, get it right, and then we don't have to worry about having to fix it if it's right the first time. And so we don't do a lot of what we all call like drill cleaning, because drill is clean at the beginning. And we don't know it to be wrong, and we have things and checkpoints and whatnot that make sure it stays that way. And so in that time frame, we try to utilize and break down as much as we can within our our scope of what we really need to get accomplished. Um, Individual feedback while we're in those moments is really important for us. We try to give back as specific feedback as possible and not so generalized. And again, it's smaller increments. The way we kind of speak to the kids about it is we're going to work really hard for 30 to 40 minutes, like nonstop, nothing unless it's, the temperature's too crazy. But when it's comfortable, we're going to work really hard for 30, 40 minutes. And then I'm going to give you 10 minutes to do whatever it is you need to do, break, talk to each other, plan out your weekend trip or whatever it is y'all are going to do. And then we're going to hit it back again for another 30, 40 minutes, really, really hard and really in depth. And so we just kind of utilize that format for the rehearsal. I try to explain it to the staff and some of the people that come out to work with us. Like it's like a TV show. We put some commercial breaks in there, but the material is very important and all well dissected.
So, Mark, when you see programs around the country, as programs you work with, is it typical to have it laid out like you say your rehearsals from 3 to 5:30, right? That beforehand, from 4:10 to 4:20 what you're doing, or like down to that specific, or is it sort of like generalized? Hey, we want to hit this and this today, or is it nope, we're going to spend 15 minutes on this and then 10 minutes on that?
Yeah, never generalized. A lot of the tricks of the trade that I've learned came from my drum corps experiences, and I've got copies literally of someone who's planning out ensemble. So just like a high school band, color guard might be separate from the winds, who are separate from the battery, from the front ensemble for, let's say, 30 minutes. But all those people know what the objectives are. But when you all come together, literally to the minute, we're going to spend 1 minute on this. We're going to spend 30 seconds on this. We're going to get 2 reps on this. And if you want a third one, that means we're going to lose a rep on that. So I find the best programs I work with are planned to that degree. I'm just throwing out a number. I've been to rehearsals here before where it was just Brian and I, because circumstances were that it was just Brian and I here. And I've been to rehearsals here where there's 8 people, and that includes inside and outside. All those people know what the objectives are before the rehearsal starts. So you don't spend the beginning rehearsal telling everybody what it's about. They know what's going to happen and what role they play in that. So that if Brian says, like, everybody, we're going to go to letter G, the color guard person doing the color guard knows, okay, letter G, I'm adding that work today because it's not in yet. I already know what that work is, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, planned to the minute.
One of the things that's helpful for our staff is we use obviously text messaging, like the week before earlier in the week. Okay, on Thursday's rehearsal, here's what our schedule plan is. Any things we want to change on this? What are our objectives? Just like as you mentioned it. That's great. But also, we use the Remind app just in checking with the kids. So, and that's one thing I learned after a bunch of years. It's like I should tell the kids exactly what we're doing as well, because so then they're aware of what the goals are too.
Absolutely. Knowledge is power. The more information they have,
Yep.
the better off it's going to be. And I think a lot of times, till Mark and I talked about this a while ago, I think a lot of people have the mentality like if they hold all the information, like that's all that really matters. But I think that we can also agree that when we walk into a situation, the more details we have about the situation, the better off the outcome is for whatever it is we're walking into. And so the more information my kids can have ahead of time, the more prepared they are for what's about to go down.
Yep. So, Mark, you help design. I mean, that's your business now. And Brian, you said that you help design with some other programs too. Am I getting that accurate?
Just very few.
Yep. Well, so the question I have is like, let's start talking about some show design stuff. So, how do you? I don't know. I guess the question I had written was help in finding a show that's a good fit for the students, the community, and the staff within a certain ensemble. Things you look for in choosing the show and how to be sure it helps the students be successful as much as possible.
Let me start with talking about a new client for me. So I have anywhere between like 14 and 17 clients per season. I don't do the same for all of them. Here at South Jones, I write the win book and I write the drill. There are people that design color guard work, but there's certainly capable people here to do that and teach those things. So if it's a new client, I send them this form to fill out, and it's kind of lengthy, but I am asking really specific questions. What is the range of all of your trumpet players? What's the highest and lowest note and what percentage? How good are your students at being musical independently on a scale of 1 to 10? how much do your students rely on everything to come from you? I really, really detailed. So I get to know about their visual skill sets and their musical skill sets per section of the ensemble. Then I ask broad questions about do you think the show needs to appeal to your football crowd or not? Do you think that are you doing something on at halftime than you do for competition, on and on? And usually the last question I ask is, tell me about your kids. What are your students like? What is the culture like? Are they silly and but can turn it off? Or are they silly and they can't turn it off? Well, I usually get things like, well, I'm working on it. They're silly and we still can't turn it off. Matter of fact, one of my new clients is one of Brian's past student teachers. And I said, what are your modeling rehearsal after? He's like, well, the same things we did at South Jones. I said, great. How does that fit your kids, which are possibly different than the kids here? And gave me some really specific answers for that. So know the culture, know the community, know the skill sets of everybody. And kind of what the vibe is of what you think your students are going to like. Last year, I had a lot of clients who were like, can we do a really dark show? My kids want to do something really dark. Cool. We can do that. And then over time, you learn, and I said this just recently to somebody about South Jones, I think Brian could tell them the show was going to be called Duct Tape, and they're like, all right, cool, let's start learning. Because the culture is at such a point of trust that Brian keeps bringing up, that they trust that whatever that's going to be. Matter of fact, this fall show is a one-word title, and if you just told them the title of the show, I think they would be excited. But 9 years ago, they wouldn't know what to think or how to react. Mm-hmm. I hope I answered your question.
So, Brian, as you're thinking about the direction of your program, because you have people who are helping you and designing for you, but in the end, you're sort of the one who has to be okay with, okay, I'm living with this show for this year, right? Like, this is the show that we want to do. What are some things you take into account as you're like, do you just say, give me a show you like to do, Mark, and let's do that show? Or do you have certain things, that you kind of like go through to be okay with the show?
So we have, I think we could probably say we have a pretty identifiable like shtick. Like we have our thing that like people know to expect out of our band program when they see them perform. And with that, we kind of stay in that realm. And we try to venture out some here and there. I think this past fall's show was definitely a little bit of a departure from what we normally do, but we knew we needed to do that to kind of we wanted to go to Grand Nationals for the first time. And in order to do that, we kind of had to be a little more intellectual with our show as we, not that the previous shows have not been intellectual, but this one definitely a little more so than in the past. So I think, making sure that it matches kind of what we do. But again, the word trust comes up, and Mark and I have worked together for a really long time. Mark has a really great sense of what's working in the world. He's very, very well versed in lots of different styles of a lot of different things. And so with all that being said, when Mark says, I'm really excited about this idea, how do you feel about it? We usually roll with it because his brain's already kind of working in a particular direction. And so we kind of just make that happen. And we've not ever done one here that I've just been like, no, not gonna do that. That's not gonna work. I think the only one that was kind of, to talk about, the kids trusting us and whatnot. I think in 2019 when we did our indoor group, indoor wins group together, but the show was called Sit, and we were like, all right, guys, we're gonna do this show, and it's gonna be about chairs and stools, and we're gonna sit down. And they're all kind of like, mm-hmm. And they're like, well, the music's gonna be really cool. And they're like, okay, all right, fair. So, and then it ended up being a really fantastic production, and the kids had a really great time with it. And so, it's just one of those things that Mark knows what we do and how we do it, and then also pushes us to try to step out of the zone that we're constantly in to get a little bit more versed in some other things as well.
A little bit while ago, maybe about 8 or 9 years ago in my town. So we did like a Nostradamus show. It was music from the planets, kind of using a lot of Nostradamus things. And it was a fairly dark show. And in that same year, like 3 or 4 dark things happened in our town. It was like kind of a not positive, had nothing to do with the show, but after we finished that show, it came around to, December, January, we're planning the next year's show. And I said to our team as we're building it, I said, we're doing a positive show. Like, I don't care what what anybody else says, I'm not doing it. Like, this town doesn't need more dark. So
Right.
we did a show entitled Hallelujah, which is basically, it was like 6 different hallelujahs from around the repertoire, and that was sort of how we put it together. I sort of had the pulse on the community, like, no, okay, we need to go a different direction now from that. I don't know if either one of you have heard the podcast That Band Life, Bobby Lambert and oh shoot, Jeff Young from Music for All.
Yeah.
They run it, and Michael Gray is I don't know if you know that name, but a drill designer, and he was on, I think it was episode 60 or something like this. But he was talking about, like, what are your tools as a band staff? What are the tools that you have to work with? So I'm curious what you think about that. Like, I had never thought of it that way. I mean, I always went, okay, my trumpets kind of stink, my flutes are awesome, the battery's killer this year, there's no guard. How do we design a show around this? To me, now I started thinking more and more about, like, okay, what are the tools we have to work with? So, for example, for us, we're a fairly small school. The entire band is 85, so the marching band's around 60. We have a wind section of just over 30. We're not going to play Carmina Burana with sustained double fortes because that's not in our wheelhouse.
Sure.
So I learned from that episode and over the years to think about, what are we good at? Like, what are things that we're good at, and how can we push the boundaries from within what we have? So I'm curious, as you guys design shows, do you, I assume you think about what your tools are, and how you can expand upon that.
Oh, sure.
I think we use the term skill sets,
Mhm.
and with a lot of my new clients, we talk about, okay, let's start putting tools in the toolbox. Let's start with this skill set, and I'll go directly to role playing. Have students do role playing, and I bring that up, and a lot of my new clients are like, my kids are never going to do that. They're never going to feel comfortable doing that. I'm like, I'll introduce it to them, and we won't put it in the show this year, but next year, I promise you, they're going to start asking you, can we do some of that? To the point that if you didn't allow the South Jones kids to role play
Mm.
and some self improvisation, they'd be like,
Yeah.
what's going on?
To be a revolt.
So there are 3 high schools in Jones County.
Mhm.
This county is in between 2 medium-sized cities, Laurel, Mississippi, and Hattiesburg, Mississippi. Hattiesburg has a really large public university, and then a smaller but pretty large music department in a private college. I would say there are students here that are in Hattiesburg every day, every weekend. They live in between that county and going to the big city and doing those things. And there are students in the band program that never leave the county, never leave this area. So the students are really, really diverse. But I think an advantage to that is that over the years, these skill sets that you've brought to the band is also paired with the culture of being super open-minded. We need you to learn this thing called a flutter step. Okay, what does that look like? I think when that was introduced, there was little to no apprehension because the culture had changed enough. What's in the toolbox for me as a designer? Brian, I'm going to call him type A, lead trumpet personality. If Brian's in the room, you know it.
Jeez.
And and the band kind of has that. You never have to beg them to play out. Not really. You don't have to beg them to improvise on their own role playing. You don't have to beg them to not be shy. So I would say the style of shows typically, or there's lots of opportunity for them to be very, very over the top emotionally, over the top musically, over the top physically. So I think we will always have those tools. And as Brian mentioned, last year going to Grand Nationals, not that there has not been things in the show that were very sophisticated that required a lot of finesse, but last year I think is the most finesse we've required from them musically and visually.
Sure.
But now it's in the wheelhouse. And if this coming fall we lean back a little bit more on the aggressive, confident, positive thing, we can still also make our finesse moments more finesse because they now have that tool in the toolbox.
Yep.
Question. How many groups in your area change uniforms year to year versus how many stay with the same uniform?
I would say it's kind of a mixed bag. Because, like, for instance, for us, we have a standard uniform that we've been using for quite some time now. Well, I guess 2021 was the first year that we've had them. And then last year we used a show specific uniform, but we plan to go back to our, I guess, standard uniform this coming fall. And so I think you have more of that than you do anything where people can come and go from it as they want. But I would say you're probably from the larger competitive groups in the area, I would say you're probably looking at a 50-50 split.
Okay. Mark, from your vantage point, for people who are hearing this uniform change thing for the first time, what are some benefits versus drawbacks of changing a uniform for each show?
I I don't know if I make this really clear to all my clients, but every thought I have about show design, I'm also thinking about the cost of that thing. How much is it going to cost? How much does it add to the show? If it doesn't add to the show, then why are we doing it? So an advantage, I have at least two or three clients that the size of the band had so outgrown, which kind of what happened here.
Yeah.
You just couldn't put the band in uniform anymore. There just weren't enough uniforms. And so for when Brian started checking in on those things that you check in on, is your black dye the same as it was for my original uniform? Is the red the same as the blue the same? Can you still get the exact same material? It had become financially unproductive to keep getting new uniforms added. So it was kind of the perfect time for let's start to do custom uniforms. And Brian is very financially responsible with the program. And he even looked up, okay, so if we do a custom top this year, but keep our pants, the bibbers, which a lot of bands around this area, if they do a custom top, they'll keep
That's what we do too. Yeah.
um, what would it cost over 5 years as opposed to just buying all new uniforms now? And so I'm pretty sure, Brian, I remember you doing that. And at that point, we're like, okay, so for the next 5 years, while the program is growing and changing, we'll do custom tops. And then at some point, we'll do a less expensive. So in the last 9 years, obviously, these companies, I'm starting to name some companies I'm not going to, are also now making uniforms that are much more lightweight, cost a lot less than completely structured uniforms that look just as great. So an advantage competitively is it helps you tell your story better. Often the students feel better in them because as opposed to being in this military influenced thing on my tin soldier, but your show is about sunshine,
Mhm.
And we like to think that they feel like they look cool in that custom uniform, and so it helps give them, you dress up to go to prom, you dress up to go to a wedding, it somehow ennobles you and gives you some confidence as well.
In a typical year for us, if students are signing up for marching band and they know that they have to buy a top, and the top is going to be $65, which has kind of been our price for a while, and they've got a few months to plan for it. Most of our families are able to do that, and if they're not, then our boosters can help them out with that. Also the concept, I was introduced 7 or 8 years ago to the concept of no gloves, no helmet, or shako, that whole following the lead of the drum corps a little bit. So I'm sort of curious about where you guys fall within that realm too. Like, we are a marching band that's high school. This is not a drum corps. There's a lot of differences between that, but following some of the artistic routes that the drum corps leads us as well.
I think, and I may be bold in saying this, but I think that um, I think that a lot of times these top groups and bands of America are driving this train a little bit more than maybe the top groups in DCI might be. Not to take away anything that the top groups in DCI are doing because it's pure incredible. But for us and our perspective, like Mark and I were talking about the other day about using an effect in the show. Is like, well, we're going like with white gloves. And we're like, I think I have some somewhere. We haven't worn them in several years, but I think we have them. And so we don't use the gloves. This past year we went without Shakos. And Mark and I have been apprehensive about the Shako-less thing for a while now because it's you can't hide behind anything, and your face really tells your story. And we've kind of gotten to the point where we feel kind of comfortable about knowing that the student performers um, can relay that message. And it's something that we've been really pushing forward with. I don't know that we're at 100% efficiency on that yet, but it's something we're getting towards. And so, we've kind of moved away from the Shako and from the white gloves, but we do have a set of like for parade versions and stuff like that. We have what's called the Shako X, which is open top, and then it's got its own custom wrap that matches the uniform. Both relatively inexpensive in comparison to the traditional version. And so that's kind of the direction we've started going, is a little more modern, but with a constant nod to what is traditional. And I think that that's been important for us to, because I like to tell the kids, we can't go somewhere if we don't remember where we've been. And so keeping those things kind of close to heart is important for me.
I like the concept of the parade uniform too. We do the same thing. We have a uniform that up until 7 or 8 years ago we used all the time, and now
Mhm.
we just use it for parade because the community sees it. They identify it with. They're like, "That's us," and they applaud for it. But for the field show, we might have something completely different.
That's right.
Yeah. Mark, any advice for people who are driving right now and they're like, "This is all great, but I got to design a marching band show, and I don't know whether to use a stock show or to come up with one on my own or whatever. I have a limited budget." Like, if you're thinking about designing a marching band show as a band director, say you want to custom design something within, you got a couple people to kind of brainstorm within. What's some advice you can give them?
I have people that I work with that the budget is incredibly limited. And so what that means is they're using stock arrangements and then getting them rewritten or asking me to rewrite those stock arrangements to fit their band. Um, so I would think that would be the first thing. Every once in a while, if I do a clinic and someone says, "Hey, I don't have designers, we can't afford designers. What do I do?" Um, I usually say, "Well, what have you been doing?" And they say, "Well, we do stock arrangements, but it doesn't always fit my instrumentation, or my trumpets can't play up above a concert F." Then I usually say, "Well, pick music that you can alter those parts or get someone to alter those parts." Um, I'm not saying that it's always free, but and certainly here because we have a large university nearby. Um, I have a lot of people that will do a lot of that pro bono. If I'm rearranging something and I can do it in 5 hours while listening to a podcast and I'm doing it for free, say if you're a band leader and you think you don't have those skills, you probably do, and it may be you just trusting yourself to revoice some things. And my experience is being a designer as long as I've been one and a college professor and a teacher, there's always somebody out there that's willing to help you and help you for free. If you're writing your own drill, there are plenty of people that I think, and it may take you, a couple phone calls and whatever to reach out and say, "Hey, I'm writing my own drill. Can I write 12 pages and send it to you?" I find that when someone does that for me, um, they, I think they're assuming that I'm going to help them creatively, but I feel like half the time their creative idea is the correct one. It's how those dots end up on the page
Mhm.
that I can guide them to better do some things. I do at least one program's drill pro bono every year, and to be honest, I can write that off on my taxes. It helps them and it helps me. And it's usually a program that I can write the entire show in a day. Um, I think there are the people out there that are willing to do those things. And getting creative. I have a program that I've been with probably at least 5 years now, and because of the reputation of the program, the community is very, very much behind them, and they do two what they call volunteer Saturdays. And it's not just band parents; it's people from all over the community that will come and help donate supplies to build a prop or donate things to buy a matching top for everybody. And we design the shows with all those things in mind so that if I know that there's a very limited budget, okay, let's try to design a show where we're not spending a lot of money. If that's helping answer your question.
One thing,
Reaching out for help, even if that's someone you don't know,
yeah,
you know of them. Uh, if they don't have time, they probably can guide you to somebody that can.
I have so many questions. One thing that took a while for me as a band director on the show design things was coming up with the concept first, and then finding the music that would fit what we want to do within that concept. That was really hard for me. Now I've been doing it long enough that I can kind of do that. But it was always, okay, here's a piece I want to use. Here's a piece I want to use. Here's a piece I want to use. Or we're doing the music of the planets or whatever. How do we design something to that? The reverse engineering of, no, we're going to do a show about America. Okay, fine. And then we're going to use this, I that is something that's, I think, hard for people to do, but very worth it.
Brian and I talk about this a lot. A lot of band directors want to be creative and be in that creative process, and it's not in their toolbox, or at least not yet. And then you have others that can do that. Absolutely. I have clients that will say, "Hey, I'm going to write my own body here." Great. And they'll send me a video, and it's rare that I'll say, "I think you need to change this and put this count here," whatever, whatever. And others that it's not in their wheelhouse, and they know it's not. I'm going to say something that I have said to Brian many times over the last years. If I'm a football coach and my team is doing okay, but the principal calls me in and says, "Hey, I'm just curious, like name your favorite professional football team." Well, I don't really have one. Okay, did you see the Saints game? Like in this area, did you see the Saints game? Like, no, I don't really watch college football or professional football. I start to become concerned because you're a football coach, but you're not participating in watching football or talking about football. I find that as times have changed, I feel like a lot of directors don't spend time watching videos or listening to recordings of other concert bands or marching bands. So I think getting comfortable with design means you're probably consuming a lot of video time. My phone will blow up with 10 videos a day sometimes, and then I may go a week without one. And it's usually Brian or somebody else, my friend PJ that I talked to this morning, just goes, "Hey, check this out." And the other part of that is sometimes half those videos are dance recitals or something that's kind of related, or it's a piece of art, and exposing and sharing those things with other people just get you doing that. So I'm not thinking of an example right now, but let's go with Tilt. It's always my go-to when Blue Coats did Tilt. Cool. What's the show about? Tilt. Okay. So what else? And then obviously, how many different ways can they show you that concept and let you hear that concept is part of it.
I think a lot of times the band directors' mistakes is they say, we're going to do a piece about the ocean, whatever, it's about the ocean. And they literally just choose 3 pieces that have the word ocean in it. And that's the extent of the design.
Yep.
And if I can add this, another conversation, Brian, I've had a lot. If you have to go into critique to explain your show for someone to hear you, you probably need to rethink your show, because you're probably not going to see that judge again. So they don't have an opportunity to give you more credit next time or recognize those things. I joke all the time. I'm trying to think of the title that I throw out there. Children's Tears on the Moons of Humanity. Okay, I need you to explain that to me, as opposed to picking something where my big belief is a judge or an audience member needs to get it on a first read. Now, it doesn't mean that the football person who's there to see their nephew play football is going to get all the things that band-centric people are going to get, but I still want them to feel engaged no matter what. So I think you got to consume a lot of video. You got to listen to a lot of recordings, and not just marching band, concert band. That alone helps inform how we start creating shows where there are connections. My coworker Cody and I, if we come up with a show concept, the next thing we talk about are, all right, what are the 5 big effects, and how do we make them effective, and what are the 20 reminders in the show over and over again? Oh, I understand why the show's called this, and I'm saying all this, I'm thinking about Brian's show for the fall. Once people hear welcome from Ellisville, Mississippi, the South Jones High School Marching Band performing their 2025 production. I think the kids are seeing the reveal video tonight.
Yeah, so we're good because this won't play.
I got you. Chill is the name of the show. Well, Brian, how many ways can we let you hear Chill and see Chill?
A bajillion.
And and it may not be Brian and I that have all of those answers. It may be somebody else that goes, "Oh, have you all thought about this? Have you thought about this?"
Yeah, I love that the dichotomy. I used to think when I was a younger teacher, like it's about being artistic only, and it's less about the audience appeal. But the more and more I teach, it's really important that the audience gets it, and that it's not just for the home crowd, right? Like you want everybody to walk away understanding it, but it's also nuanced at the same time.
We talk a lot of times about like different layers of intellect.
Yeah.
What's on the surface for people who don't live in our world can still be enjoyable, but creating it in a way that the people that do live in our world can enjoy it and at a deeper level as well. And writing the screenplay first and then setting the music to it is kind of the overall feel for kind of how we plan what we do is we kind of start with our effects and then build everything around that and find some music we like and listen to a ton of stuff on Apple Music.
I remember being a very young band director, and somebody told me, "Well, do you know about the 30-second rule?" Now, I think everybody has a different number of seconds for that they use here, but in the concept, because I had said, "Here, let's use this," and I like planned something, and they said, "Okay, it's been 2 minutes and nothing's happened." Okay, so every 30 seconds, something needs to happen. And I struggled with that for a long time. So how do you guys approach that? Always having something for the audience to look at so they don't get bored.
I think we call it the roller coaster ride, where it's always going up and down. And in those down moments is kind of when you time out the commentary, and if the effects and everything are planned out correctly, um, the judges will be talking about something while you're setting something else up or trans. Not I don't want to use the word transition because it sometimes transitions get set in the way where they're not important in the structure of the show. But anyway, like going from one thing to the next does have to have importance. And then thinking again about those moments in between point A and point B,
Mhm.
because not all the judges are looking at point A and point B. They might be on a different assignment. So we have to make sure that all those things appeal within the realm. And so, Mark's really good at crafting all of this in a time frame. And then, but we've also had several instances where like, we need a few more measures in this spot. And we did that. I think this year we added a couple places where we just needed a few more counts so that we could get something to happen better or not feel so rushed within the pacing and you wanted it to be more natural and organic in its implementation and through that you kind of just get used to the construction and how it's supposed to happen from time to time and again roller coaster rides got to go up and down the whole time.
Question for both of you as we're kind of wrapping up here. Who's the name of another band director kind of in your area or program that you want to highlight that you think are really good at what they do and why?
I would say within the state, I have two very close friends, Lynn Kilo at Hernando High School and Justin Harvison at Germantown High School, who particularly in the marching band and just band in general are two of the most impressive directors with the depth of knowledge that is far surpassed what I'll hope. I'd like to be able to do half of what they can do, but they're both incredible teachers with wonderful band programs. And over time, I hope to be able to learn as much as they've learned.
Mark, what about you?
That's a tough one. Eric Fry. I'm gonna throw out Eric's name. Eric is not an older established band director in the state of Mississippi. He was a student in a drum corps that I designed for, and that's how I got to know him. He was a student at Southern Mississippi when I was a professor there. I think he's like in year 5, 6, 7 at this point.
I think it's 7.
And watching him grow, he is in a new program now. The program he was in before that, and I don't mean to throw anybody on the bus, needed a lot of forward growth in a very small program. And very quickly, in 2 or 3 years, because of the trust that he built with his students, because of his trust in me and other designers, the band ended up medaling, I think its second year participating in the competitive circuit here in Mississippi. And again, talk about designing for the strengths and weaknesses of the program and him changing the culture really quickly. So that's kind of a shout out to all the Eric Fries in the world that are still relatively young directors that are trusting other people to help them implement things. He's great at saying, okay, this doesn't sound good. Great. Can you send me a recording? And me saying, do this, this, and this. Okay. Without being defensive, without saying, well, I've tried that and it didn't work for me. He's saying, okay, I probably didn't do that the way that you're describing exactly. So, yeah, the two directors that Brian named are great at what they do. And so my brain was trying to think, okay, how else can we frame this for anybody else that's listening, and if you're a young director, keep asking questions and keep seeking people out and keep caring about the kids and keep caring about their sense of self-esteem and success through music.
Well, one point I want to just leave on is to kind of put some praise on Brian here is obviously Brian, like you have Mark working with your program, working for your program, working with you, for you. I don't know how you say it, but
Yes.
that's always what I say too. It's one of those, like, you don't want to be the smartest person in the room, right? You clearly try to put strong people, strong designers, strong teachers around you. I even say it like this, like if my kids are sick and I have to miss rehearsal, like I want there to still be a good rehearsal, right?
Sure. Absolutely.
So that ability to feel strong enough and secure enough in your own abilities to say, I don't know everything. I want to learn more, I think is very applaudable. And I think there's a lot of teachers, especially younger teachers, who think they need to know everything. And because of that, their students suffer because they don't bring in strong people all along the way. Mark, would you agree with that?
Yeah. I had a mentor when I went to Texas. I taught in Louisiana for 1 year and then went to Texas. And a man named Lee Boyd Montgomery, who's no longer with us, knocked on my door and said, "Hey, I teach at the local private college. I'm here to be a mentor for anything that you need." And I was 25. I was in charge of a 5A program in Texas, which at that time was the largest classification. Probably should not have been hired at that age. And we talked a little bit, and then he just said, "What do you know about clarinet?" And I talked about what I knew about clarinet. And a week later, he was in my office with my first chair clarinet player and asked her to play some scales. And then he said, "All right, what do you see?" And I couldn't answer the question other than, "I'm watching this student play the clarinet." He said, "What about hand position? Where was her pinkies? What about her chin? What about the corners of her lips? What about breathing? Is she breathing through her nose? Is she breathing through the corners of her mouth?" And I was just like, I
All
need
the
this.
things.
I need this. So yeah, even now, I mean, I'm 61, uh, agreed to do Madison Scouts last year as a programming this year. And I have 30-year-old staff members I'm watching teach, and I'm learning, and I'm going, I'm stealing that, I'm stealing that, and I'm stealing that, and I'm stealing that. And yeah, make it your own. But Stravinsky often said this: steal from the best. There's a lot of best around us.
Yeah. Mark and Brian, thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it so much.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks.
We sincerely appreciate you taking your valuable time and listening to the Growing Band Director podcast. Your students are very lucky to have a band director like you. If you have any suggestions for episode topics or think you have an area of expertise to share on a show with us, please reach out. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to help spread the word, please give us a 5-star review and tell your band director friends to subscribe as well. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, our YouTube channel, and wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for listening to The Growing Band Director. See you next week.